Okay, hello everyone. Lots of people starting to file in. Welcome. We are just going to give everybody a couple minutes to come in, but in the meantime, while we're waiting, why don't you all let us know in the chat where you're coming from, maybe the name of your organization, where you're located, so that we can get to know you a little bit better. Lots of people coming in. This is great. Welcome. Welcome. We've got somebody from Empower Simcoe in Barrie. Welcome, Esther. Okay. Vancouver in Thorold. Vancouver again. Welcome. Oh, wow. Oh, here we go. It always takes a second for people to start putting them in, and then they all come in so fast I can't even see them. Chicago, Alberta. Welcome. Okay, awesome. Lots and lots of people here from all over North America, it looks like. So we're going to get started. So first of all, thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. My name is Meredith. I'm Keela's head of marketing. We also have Stephanie, our marketing specialist, helping us out today on the tech side of things. You may see her in the chat box or answering some of your technical questions, so feel free to say hello to Steph. And before we get started, I just want to start this session today by acknowledging that Keela's head office is located in Vancouver, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and give thanks for their generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. If you are new to Keela, welcome. Keela is a donor management and fundraising platform that helps you deepen donor engagement, centralize your data, and raise more for your cause. And just before I introduce today's session, I just have a couple quick housekeeping items to go over. So today's session is about 45 minutes in length, plus a 10 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end. Don't forget that you can adjust your closed captioning settings at any time if you need to by clicking the button at the bottom of the screen. And throughout the presentation, please feel free to write any questions you have in the chat box or in the Q&A. We also have the questions that were pre-submitted during registration, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can today. And speaking of the chat box, please remember to select everyone when you type so that all of our guests today can see your comments and questions. And finally, the webinar is being recorded, and you will receive access to the recording within the next few business days. So with all of that out of the way, I am going to quickly hand it over to Malia Rogers from Imagine Canada.
Great, thank you, Meredith. Hi, everyone. My name is Malia. I'm Grant Connect's Content Management Coordinator, and I come to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, colonially known as Ottawa, Ontario. And I'm very pleased to be here today with you all to learn more about the community-centric fundraising movement and how we can work together toward a more equitable model of philanthropy and fundraising. I'm happy to take a moment before we start to talk about Imagine Canada's fundraising platform, Grant Connect. So Grant Connect is one of Canada's oldest social enterprises, drawing on more than 50 years of research experience to provide subscribers across the sector with high quality funder data. Our mission is to help charities and nonprofits in Canada find funders and opportunities that align with their work and with their values and save them time in doing so. We all know how much time it can take to find quality funding opportunities, and Grant Connect helps with that by offering data on well over 11,000 Canadian foundations, over 500 corporations, hundreds of government grant programs, and many other funding sources, including international opportunities. Grant Connect is a user-friendly platform designed for fundraisers, development officers, prospect researchers, nonprofit and charity executives, social entrepreneurs, and students entering the sector. And I can tell you that our team spends a lot of time looking at grant applications and processes, and we're really, really excited about the community-centric fundraising movement and the potential for fundraising and granting practices to become more equitable, accessible, and community responsive. Within our platform, we're already taking steps to support this, such as by adding tags and filters, including funding opportunities for organizations without charitable status and for organizations supporting Black communities, for example. And we're really, really excited to keep learning and supporting this really exciting movement toward fundraising that centers communities in meaningful ways. So that's all from me. If you want to learn more about Grant Connect or have any suggestions for making the platform more useful for you and your organizations, you can feel free to email us at grantconnect@imaginecanada.ca, and I'll be sure to put that email in the chat. And thanks in advance to Meredith and Stephanie and to Maria for what I'm sure will be a really exciting and informative webinar. I'll send it back over to you, Meredith.
Awesome, thanks, Malia. So I am very excited to welcome our expert speaker for today, Maria Rio. Maria is a fundraising consultant with Further Together and has over 10 years experience in the nonprofit sector. She is regularly asked to speak on issues related to fundraising, and her op-eds have been featured in national publications. She was also a finalist for the National 2022 Charity Village Best Individual Fundraiser Award and has a deep passion for nonprofit work and the work that all of you are doing on this call today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Maria.
Great, thank you so much. Oh, so great. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. So yeah, today we'll be talking about aligning your fundraising to CCF principles. For the purposes of the presentation, I'll be using CCF and community-centric fundraising as interchangeable terms, and they just mean the same thing. So a little bit about me. My name is Maria. My pronouns are she and her. I came to Canada as a refugee when I was 9 years old, and because of the situation of me coming here, I accessed a lot of charitable services. So food banks, drop-ins, Christmas gifts from strangers, all that stuff. So this topic is really personal and professionally important to me. I've been in fundraising for 10 years, fundraising for things such as human rights and cancer research. And most recently, I was the Director of Development and Communications at the Stop Community Food Center, where I spent the last 2 years working on community-centric fundraising. So that has been really great. And since January, I've been consulting to work with as many organizations who are really excited about ethical fundraising, ethical communications, ethical governance, and just moving towards the least harmful way to do what we do. Today, what I want to talk about is community-centric fundraising, the dirty money dilemma, how do nonprofits perpetuate white supremacy, auditing your practices, and then testing your knowledge. So the first thing to look at is this. So has your fundraising ever looked like this? So you have your board member, your donor, who here I have represented by an older white woman, your board member, who I have here represented by, some corporate guy, and then everyone else, so your staff, your volunteers, your partners, your community members, being kind of the last and very stressed out about everything else. So really how we position people looking like this. And how can we make it look like this other image on the right? So community, board, donors, staff, volunteers, and partners, all on the same playing field, all equally valued, and all feeling like they have voice and power to contribute to what we're doing. So for those who are not doing deep dives on CCF just yet, I just want to do a really quick recap. So CCF was a model conceptualized by Boulay of Nonprofit AF and formally launched by a group of fundraisers in Seattle who were disillusioned by current donor-centric fundraising practices and wanted to center the community. So the movement has been around for a few years. It's now grown quite a bit, and a lot of organizations have adopted the model. So the model is founded on equity and social justice. It prioritizes the whole community over individual organizations, brands, and it fosters a sense of belonging and interdependence. We present our work as holistic successes instead of individual successes and encourage mutual support between nonprofits. For me personally, it's about reimagining how we do things and questioning why we have been doing it that way. When we have so many issues in the sector, like mostly white donors, mostly white board members, mostly white EDs, and the people served are not exactly of that demographic, we really need to start questioning things. So CCF is, to me, about questioning, about trying to determine the best path forward with everybody in the room, not just a very selective group. and changing how we do our fundraising, our storytelling, our governance, our recruitment, our HR practices, all those things branch out to me from those CCF principles. So I'll just go over the 10 principles here. You can definitely find them online on the CCF hub, but these principles are kind of the high overview. So the first one is fundraising must be grounded in race, equity, and social justice. Individual organizational missions are not as important as the collective community. Nonprofits are generous with and mutually supportive of one another. All who engage in strengthening the community are equally valued, whether volunteer, staff, donor, or board member. Time is equally valued as money. We treat donors as partners, and this means that we're transparent and occasionally have difficult conversations. We foster a sense of belonging, not othering. We promote the understanding that everyone, donors, staff, funders, board members, and volunteers, personally benefits from engaging in the work of social justice. So it's not just charity and compassion. We see the work of social justice as holistic and transformative, not transactional. And we recognize that healing and liberation requires a commitment to economic justice. So these principles are the overarching values of community-centric fundraising. If you have questions about each one of these, you can actually check out the CCF hub, and there's smaller things to think about under each one. So that's really helpful. So that being said, CCF has a lot of upsides, but with the way that philanthropy has been done over the past X amount of time, it also comes with some challenges. So that's where the dirty money dilemma comes in. We still have to operate within a very flawed system. So we don't operate in a bubble, and we have to continue to fund the amazing work that we do, but in the least harmful way. So dirty money, problems with how money was created, and tainted donors, problems with who is giving the money, cause an ethical dilemma for fundraisers. So it kind of puts us in a complicated spot, because are you really going to say no to $1 million gift from this terrible person? So how can nonprofits address those questions before they come up? So how can we really live by our values? How can we see the problems that we're contributing to on a systemic scale and address that to be as least harmful as possible? So affect positive social change. I personally believe that you can't change what you don't acknowledge, right? So we really have to talk about some of the first things, some of the bigger problems in nonprofits. So white supremacy, white saviorism, that's baked into the model, and it's really informed a lot of how we do things. So our communications, how exploitative it can be, presenting a community service user to a donor. This image I really like because it kind of unravels some of what we see and experience. So overt white supremacy, you could see obviously things that would be unacceptable, right? And then we have covert white supremacy, which if you're white, you may not have considered are obviously unacceptable, but if you're racialized, they have caused you harm, I'm sure. So take a look at this and see kind of what you've experienced when it comes to your personal lives, to your professional lives, what you witnessed other people go through. So for me, for example, I see respectability politics, tone policing, white savior complex, paternalism, not believing the experiences of BIPOC, white silence, color blindness, denial of white privilege. A lot of these things, bootstrap theory that really seeps into our communications. A lot of these things are a part of the problem, but we might not immediately acknowledge them as part of the problem. So I want you all to pull your phones. I have some interactive pieces woven throughout the presentation. So the first one is just trying to see where we are at in the comfort with CCF knowledge and in our organizations, how far is that along? So if you go to this QR code or go to menti.com and type in 52 48 78 61, you'll be able to participate. I think Stephanie is going to throw the link in the chat. Yeah, already did. Thank you. Perfect. So you'll be able to participate If you don't have your phone, please just join from your computer with that link. So we'll go to the next slide now. Okay, so please start rating these. Let's try to get some answers up here. So we have strongly disagree on the left, strongly agree on the right. So I feel comfortable talking about systemic barriers with donors. How true does that feel for you? My board and ED backs me in rejecting a problematic gift. I have started implementing CCF at work. I know which direction my nonprofit is heading CCF-wise. I feel supported in my CCF journey, and I am committed to stepping in as an ally for a colleague. I love that it's live because each answer is like, but we can definitely give it maybe a minute and see what we come up with. Really interested in maybe keeping these questions for future presentations as well to see how time allows people to get more comfortable with some of these topics and challenges. Because definitely a few years ago, talking about systemic barriers with donors would have been pretty difficult for most of us, but 3.3 so far. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was before for sure. My board and ED back me in rejecting a problematic gift. We have that at 3.4. Implementing CCF at work already, 3.3. This one makes me sad. I know which direction my nonprofit is heading CCF wise. It seems like that's kind of more half and half. I feel supported in my CCF journey. But the last one, I'm committed to stepping in as an ally for a colleague. So that's really good to hear because as we see, there's a lot of different problems facing people who are marginalized or oppressed in our organizations. So something else that I want to ask you is, why are you here today? What changes do you want to see in our sector? I think the answer should also pop up live. Let's see. Let's enter. Yeah, great. So what changes do you want to see in our sector? What could CCF do for your organization or for your service users? I think if you type it out, it should just pop up right over here. Nice. I want to see more equitable fundraising and funding. More operating grants. Yeah, really talking about the difference between restricted and unrestricted. How to approach fundraising and avoid pitfalls. Yes, lots of great answers. Diversity of board members, more collaboration among nonprofit, more input from those participating in our saviorism, less whites, sorry, from in our services. Less white saviorism, serve as a guide when facing difficult choices, work better with other organizations. These are great. Less transactional relationships. Nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, so absolutely, like we all want more integrity. That's a really good one. We all want people to stick to what they're saying publicly at a minimum, and to ensure that we commit the less amount of harm and our funders and donors are also committed to that. So I'll go to the next slide. I added a little bit about what I want. So, you know, multi-year support, like donors who understand, a board that understands, systemic change, removing white supremacy from our sector. Something that I haven't added here just yet, because I was thinking about it today, is like a fundraising association that is truly invested in equitable fundraising and anti-racism, and for staff to be treated like people. So something that I'm sure we can all agree with. So how can we get there? So if we can't change what we don't acknowledge, then we have to identify what needs to be changed. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's do an audit, right? So we can audit our storytelling, our fundraising, our governance, our HR, X, Y, and Z, but I'm only going to talk about storytelling and fundraising for today. So there's a few different things that you could be looking for, right? So poverty tourism and trauma porn. So what that means, I'll just explain it really quickly. It's when you invite donors to participate or to like witness the issues in a voyeuristic manner. So that could be donor tours, videos, storytelling, or events. So for example, like you have a community member who's like crying about not having food, praising the organization, thanking the donor. Basically, donor-centric charity gold is the opposite of what CCF is aiming for. So really bringing the dignity of the person to the forefront. And I use these two images because let's say you work in X organization, cancer research, addiction, homelessness, anything like that. These images could be of the same organization, right? It just depends how you want to position yourself, your participants, your systemic issues that people are facing. But one of these images brings a lot more dignity and a lot more agency to one of these people, right? So I just wanted to share that image with you as well, because that dignity is very, very important. So another example that I wanted to share is like when you have a corporate donor who comes in and says like, can you take a picture of me giving, this t-shirt to this poor person, right? Like that feels yucky to me as someone who has been the poor person. So, how often are you engaging your community members on how you position the organization, how you position them, how you position the impacts of the organization as a whole? So that positioning is very important, right? So the donor, we know all the issues with this. We make them the hero of the story, no matter what kind of person they are or what they've done. They're the decision maker. Sometimes we create programs around their wants. Definitely very savior. And there's a lot of issues with that, right? With organizational positioning, again, a little bit of a savior. Are we being realistic with the impacts that we have on individuals? So for example, if you provide, like I said earlier, like I was accessing Christmas gifts for when I was a child. So is that organization going to be able to say, we changed that person's life? Like, did you not? If it's a food hamper and you say like, we're making this huge impact, it's like, well, people are not going to be able to retire. They're still going to face discrimination. They're not going to be able to afford rent. So just really thinking about how you position your organization and of course your service users. Are you showcasing them as helpless individuals at their worst time or as capable individuals who are experiencing barriers to opportunities? When it comes to advocacy, that's something that I know a lot of like Canadian charities are a little bit afraid of, and especially, if you have a lot of like white board members, they tend to be very against any form of advocacy. But it's something that's critically important because what are we doing? Like, am I just fundraising to keep funding food hampers and not actually trying to change any of these issues? Am I okay with people continuing to face these, barriers to healthcare? Whatever your cause is, it might be rooted in systemic issues. I don't know what your cause is, but it might be. So we really need to take action to affect change on a systemic level. It can't just be piecemeal addressing hunger or poverty or social isolation. It has to be a more large scale solution. And how do we do that is through advocacy, through public policy, through voting, through having these conversations with our donors. So part of the audit, is your organization doing advocacy? Are you asking your community members what would make the biggest impact for them? Those kind of pieces. So I do have an additional set of questions for you to reflect on. You can feel free to screenshot this if you'd like. But basically, would a participant feel comfortable and respected in the room? Or are they expected to kind of cry and show appreciation to the donor and kind of be used as a prop or a puppet? Do donors have the opportunity to walk in or participate in programming? Is your organization doing education and public policy work around systemic issues? Do you push back on problematic notions or comments made internally or externally? So if they say like, oh, I want you to, find me, I'm just going to say poor Mexican kid because I'm Mexican. to hold this piece of paper? Are you pushing back on that, or are you just looking for a service user? Do you get consent from participants? Can they retract their consent at any time? Do they get the opportunity to review the story before it's published? Do you partner with problematic or voyeuristic donors? Are participants reflected in the organization in general? So when it comes to your strategic planning, your governance, all these things that have huge impacts on how participants are portrayed. Do you have anyone with the lived experience? Are most people in the room lived experience? Okay, so now that we talked a little bit about storytelling, let's move on to fundraising. I love these images anyways. Okay, so fundraising. There's obviously a lot of different things that could be happening better in fundraising. One of them is decentering donors and centering the community. So status quo stewardship is extremely donor-centric right now. We bend over backwards to appease a donor. We take whatever useless gift in kind item that they want to give us, like 50 mismatched socks, and say thank you, and then take it out back and throw it out. But why do we do this? Do we really think donors can't understand or won't understand? Personally, I want to partner with people who truly want to move equity forward. And to do that, I need to have these conversations with them. I need to step in if there's something that could be done better, like if they're saying, I want to give you 50 mismatched socks, and explain why that's not dignified. So the donor recognition and engagement, do you put your donors on a pedestal? They can put their name everywhere they wish. This practice is pretty transactional, and it stratifies donors based on wealth and not equally represents what people are giving the organization. So people who are giving hours and hours of time, or people who have been donating $10 a month for the last 10 years, they don't receive that same kind of recognition that we have for major donors. So how can we make sure that that's more even across the board? Donor education, so oversimplification of impact or overhead. So yes, we're changing lives, or it only takes $2 to run this program. Really educating the donor on some of these problematic notions. So talking about restricted versus unrestricted, how making program requests based on what they think you should do can be quite problematic. Like it needs to be a community informed approach. What CCF is. So those have been really interesting conversations with donors, because you find out that they're much farther in their thinking that your board member is, or maybe your ED. They're really thinking about it. And just any problematic notions. If they say something terrible, like you should push back. What revenue streams can be tweaked? So what needs to go? What is not aligned with your values? What is not aligned with what your community members would feel comfortable attending? Things like that. So an example that I give is, so when I was working at the Stop Community Food Center, we were talking about moving away from very elitist events that cost, $350 to attend. And I was saying, like, hey, I've used food banks, I've used drop-ins, and $350 would buy me food for about like 3 months. Like, how could you expect someone to pay that? And if it's exclusionary by design of our community members, is that the best way to approach our mission? Like, how are we saying that we value everybody having a seat at the table while excluding them from the table? So just really revisiting, and this will be different from organization to organization, but seeing what aligns with your values and what actually pushes things to be equitable, even if they've always been done that way, like really changing that for the best. And then centering the collective mission. So how are you sharing money, the spotlight, resources, knowledge with other organizations to best serve the community that you serve? So if it's, people experiencing homelessness, how are you working with other organizations who work in that specific part of the sector to actually bring about positive change through advocacy, through petitions, through resource sharing, donations, anything like that? Okay, great. So here we go with a list of other how does this apply questions. So doing an audit of your fundraising can be really helpful because it can get everybody on the same page. So your board members, your ED, your fundraising team can kind of know if a problematic donor says X, Y, and Z, am I going to be supported when I say I don't want you to be involved with our organization anymore? How do you fundraise in accordance with your mission? So are we doing galas? Are we doing NFTs? Are we accepting useless gift in kind items? If I talk to a donor about racism and white supremacy and the source of their wealth, is that going to be questioned or is that going to be the norm? Treating people as partners from the get-go. So that includes service users and donors, making sure that things are as not transactional as possible, really actual partnerships. And if people are not interested in that, great, bye. Conversations with supporters regarding taxes or charity washing. So if someone terrible is offering you $1 million, are you going to take that money? I say $1 million because that's the number that would be most enticing, right? To a nonprofit, you could say, no, I'm not going to take your $5,000. But when it comes down to it, where does your integrity lie? Where do your values lie? Great, building authentic partnerships internally and externally on a mutual understanding of white saviorism, capitalism, the nonprofit industrial complex, and more. So based on what we talked about so far, let's have a look at these two videos. So these videos are from the same program at the stop. I was involved with making the one on the right, but the one on the left left me quite disturbed when I first saw it. So let's just talk about these two videos in comparison to each other. They're not a direct comparison. It's more like apples and oranges a tiny bit, but it's just really good to see how you can talk about the same program through a very donor-centric versus a very community-centric approach. So I'll play the first video and just kind of like take notes in your head, and then I'll play the second video. And then in the same link, menti.com with that code, if Stephanie can throw it in the chat again, just in case someone closed it, just write what you spotted. So that'll be the third piece after the two videos. So we'll start that now.
I used to be a lawyer in Colombia. I came to Canada as a refugee. I was on welfare in the beginning, and I found a job. Actually, I have 2 jobs. I think that was enough because I was doing like money, but I don't have any fulfillment.
My OHIP card had expired years and years and years ago. And so I came to the ID clinic to get a new one. So I came to stop and I found out about all this other things like, oh, so a vegetable, you actually eat them? Computer like,
Oh, Maria, I think we might have lost the sound.
Sorry?
I think we may have lost the sound on our end.
No. Okay, let's see.
so
Here we go, you're good.
It was hard for me to get food, to get a job, to do an application, to send a letter, something like that. So I found out about this place, and actually, I would say that it saved my life.
The experience of not having enough to eat is actually quite devastating. I should perhaps warn you, everything makes me cry.
I got involved through the community action training.
The community action training is a training that the stop runs for community members. They learn more about what is the grassroots causes of the poverty they facing. The person start being aware of the barriers and accepting who they are and really get commitment to make a change.
You want to work, but there's no work there, and
you can come here and you can have a good meal, and it's healthy food, you know. It's just, I mean, it's really hard to put in words, you know. Just come here and have a nice meal, and just, yeah, it'll help you a lot.
I didn't know I was completely lacking in any kind of support structure in my life. I was just totally oblivious to that. It's being able to do the things that you already know how to do, but haven't been able to do.
I volunteer in the advocacy office, and I think that helped me to heal. Because when I came to Canada, there was like, I don't know, wounds. Yeah. And I sorry. I use my skills that I brought from my country here to help other people. And I speak for the people that sometimes they cannot speak.
When I walked into the stop the first time to use the food bank, I had 2 contacts in my phone, my ex and my doctor. And now my contact list is full.
I feel included when I'm with the stop people.
I feel empowered here. Is the best reward that I as a person can have.
You know, I was a community member. I use that office a lot, and I now I want to do the same. You know, that's what I want to do.
People can come to the advocacy office and seek the help they need. We are there to support them so that they in turn can support themselves.
Most of them have come back to us and say, thank you for a job well done.
It's fun. You help others. I want to help more often.
Okay, so sorry about that audio cutting out a little bit, but hopefully it's fine now. So this will be the second video, the one that was made a few years later about the same program.
Goals of the advocacy program at the stop are to empower and support community members in building healthy, connected, and just lives through dignity and self-determination. We do that through various ways, through peer leadership and training, through one-on-one supports, through running an advocacy info and referral office, and through our financial empowerment program. The reality is that a lot of our community members have needs that are beyond food security, but related to poverty. So if someone is being evicted from their house, or if somebody in Ontario works, social assistance is getting cut off, then getting a hamper from a food bank just won't suffice. There's a whole system in there. We have a social safety net in Canada that is supposed to help us all, but social assistance, for those who don't know, really pay the bare minimum. 67% of our service users are on social assistance. We need the system to change, and the easiest way to change that is through changing the public policy. And provincial elections are very important because provincial public policy, that's where social assistance rates are set. That's where a lot of healthcare decisions are made. I want to live in a world where someone who has a disability that prevents them from being able to work, where they live a dignified and fair life, a just life. And I think society would be better if no one lives in poverty. So I really think that elections are a good time to really get informed. The community advocacy program supported community members in different ways throughout COVID. When the state of emergency was first declared on March 15th, 2020, we had to shut down all our operations and we went to a hotline model. And so between 10 and 12, every single phone call was answered. So that was a very important service because for the first time ever, people who, for example, never used the food bank before were finding themselves needing to use the food bank and would call us and ask us about that. And we remained open throughout, with the exception of a couple of months in the winter. One of the first things that I noticed when I joined the stop was the high standard of service that we have, and that the word dignity is not just something that we, say, but it's actually reflected in our services. And so I really try to ensure that dignity is something that is the basis of how we operate in the community advocacy program as well.
Great. So let's move on to what you spotted. So you can use that Mentimeter link. If you're, oh, sorry. Yeah, I muted for a second. If you
are having difficulty, just refresh the page and it should be kind of similar to before, where you can add what you spotted and it'll pop up right here. So what did you like about the first video? What did you like about the second video? What was wrong? Seems like two different programs. Yeah, it's very different. The first one was very trauma porny, and the second one was more focused on the program. The second video was so much clearer and the program was easier to understand. Definitely more uplifting and informative on what the organization actually does and who they help, creating a view of the organization that could speak to donors and people who need help. I learned more about the organization in the second video. The participants seemed uncomfortable on camera in the first video. I know, it was terrible. Yeah, seeing people cry is not appropriate. Very inclusive, all about mission impact. One was about problems, the other about solutions. And I think like definitely having someone share their story can be like very impactful for that person. That's why I'm sharing my story with you. But just the way that you do it has to be very controlled, because you know my mental health also matters. It's not just about sharing my story. And that's the same way that we need to treat our participants, right? So really make sure that there's dignity there. Storytelling video was more compelling for me. Exactly. Yes, it can be very touching, right? But some of those things should remain private. You know, some of the worst moments in your life shouldn't be monetized. First one was very heavy, traumatic, makes me feel terrible. Yeah, I agree. More dignified and compelling. Thank you for sharing those answers. So some things that I spotted, I'll share with you as well. So for the first video, it changed my life. Did it really? It's a food hamper. Trauma of poor or racialized presented for the often rich white donor. So there's that as well, like purposely picking people who have accents, for example. Pandering, voyeuristic, people depicted as unable to help themselves, people crying. For the second one, participants not exploited. It's not a community member or the ED, it's a frontline staff. So people who you might not usually hear from. Donor education, not overselling the impact of donations or charity, talking about the importance of voting and being politically engaged, not oversimplifying issues and limitations of nonprofit work. So I'll leave you with this. We all have a sphere of influence. Each of us needs to find our own sources of courage so that we can begin to speak. There are many problems to address, and we can't avoid them indefinitely. We cannot continue to be silent. We must begin to speak, knowing that words alone are insufficient. But I have seen that meaningful dialogue can lead to effective action. Change is possible. I know a lot of you already signed up for my email list. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to share the information that I know and that I've learned over the past 2 years. If you would like to sign up now, I do want to give a prize away. So one will be a copy of Collecting Courage, which if you're in the Toronto community, you see all the stuff that's going on with AFP Toronto. And I really want to support in a very small way, but I just introduce people to that book. And a copy of Rest is Resistance. This is from, I think she calls it the NAP ministry, just talking about how rest is an anti-capitalist move. So it's very healing. So yeah, Esther threw the link in the chat for the petition. There's been over 700 signatures. So if you want to sign that and kind of push AFP in the right direction, that's great. And if you want to enter the giveaway, you can do so by signing up for my email list. If I already have your email from your registration, you're entered automatically. But thank you all so much for your time and for listening. I really appreciated all of that. You can find me on LinkedIn or on my website, and we'll do some questions now, I think.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Maria. That was incredibly valuable and important information for you to share with everybody. Let's do some questions. So just a reminder, we can still take questions. So throw them in the chat or the Q&A and we'll get to as many as we can. But we'll start with this one. So Maria, do you have any practical advice to get a development team to move from donor-centric to community-centric fundraising?
Yeah, definitely. So some of the questions, this is one of the questions that was pre-submitted. And some of these I do a much deeper dive in the answers that you'll receive. There's, I think, 6 or 7 of them. But to get people on board, how do you get people to understand? So the first step is the audit, then getting buy-in. So building a case for support, finding allies internal or external to the organization, people that can speak to the changes, and making it very quantifiable for your board members or your ED, anyone who's not understanding, even your donors. It's like, hey, I want to move away from this gala format because when I was food insecure, it didn't make any sense. I would never be able to go. So just having those conversations with people really opens up that opportunity for them to share and to ask questions. Now, if your board or ED are resistant to, doing equitable things, or looking for, KPIs to justify the move, it might be time for a deeper conversation. So this is a really great time for you to use your allyship. So when I was asking, like, when would you step in for a buddy? This is a great time, right? So having confrontation with your board members, with your ED, be ready to face some resistance, because a lot of the people in those positions are very privileged and have never had to go through some of the lived experiences stuff that your community members might face. And it's a hard journey, but you have to keep at it. Like, it's not easy. Like, even with the stop, when I did it for 2 years, I don't feel that I had the support of everyone at the organization, but I feel very strongly that the fundraising team was very aligned to these values. And fundraisers hold a lot of power. So, just use your power for good. Don't use it to continue perpetuating harm.
Okay, so we got a question just now that says, can you talk more about your take on planned giving with respect to community-centric fundraising?
Oh, planned giving. Yes. So planned giving. Okay, so we did this thing at the stop, which was a program that incentivized people to talk to, like, our financial representative that we are providing you about how to maximize your, like, tax avoidance on your estate. So we did that for a while, and we realized, like, this is not community-centric fundraising at all. This is the opposite of what we want to be doing. So we stopped that, and then we started talking about how do we make planned giving CCF aligned. And it's very hard. And each time that you start thinking about philanthropy, it all unravels, right? So, okay, planned giving, like, a big incentive is the tax avoidance, right? Which you don't want to do. That's not correct. But, like, even if they don't get the information from you, you're still benefiting from them avoiding taxes. But that's the same thing as major gifts. What's the difference? Like, that they're using your organization as a way to, like, decrease or capital gains tax and all that stuff. So it just gets really messy. And I don't think I have an answer to the planned giving question just yet, because it's so in my mind now tied to the major gifts question. Sorry, I know that's not a great answer, but I'm still pondering that one. Planned giving has been, a problem in my mind.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so we got another question in that's a little bit specific, but I think, in general, if someone is wondering if you have any insight on how we praise funders and donors for causes that may not directly have a human at the end. So the example that they gave is, an environmental organization. And if you have any advice on how to be aware of systemic issues within those kinds of causes.
Well, like, capitalism is everywhere, right? So even environmental causes, environmental issues, that will definitely seep into, like, racism, who has access to land, who is destroying the planet. So when it comes to praising donors, like, I don't have a problem in practice with praising donors who have a really long-standing relationship with your organization, that are not transactional, that are signing onto your petitions, that are true partners in the work. My issue is more like, are you also doing that for other people who are equally contributing, right? So your donors are there for 10 years. Are you also praising them, and how are you doing that? And your volunteers, are you also praising them, and how are you doing that? And if not, then why do you feel this like constant need to praise your donors just because it's money? Because remember, donors also get a lot out of this work. Like, we're just the connector between something that they actually really want to do. So they should be praising us equally, right? So if you don't believe that, why not? Like, if we're partners in the work, why is it not okay to like thank everyone the same manner and treat everyone the same manner? Also, you know, for some of these people, like, you work with them and giving you $2 million, it's like giving you 20 bucks, right? Like, it's like me giving you 20 bucks, but for them, it's nothing. So praising them for what exactly? Like, this person gave away like 0.5% of their wealth. Thank you. You know, so like really think about that.
Agreed. We have somebody who asked if you're able to kind of unpack or elaborate more on the idea of voyeuristic donor.
Yeah, definitely. It's more like you can invite a donor to understand the issues, absolutely, and you should. But when it comes to how you're inviting them to view the issues, is it very like looking at something that should be private? Like, if you were the person who was crying, would you want some person just looking at you through a window, right? Let's say social media screen, some of your most vulnerable life moments or death moments, or, you know, huge pain points for you. Like, it's just not appropriate. So that's what I mean by voyeuristic. And another thing I mean by that is also, we do a lot of nonprofit like challenges. So like, try to live on $700 and pretend you're on ODSP. Like, isn't that exciting? And those are also not appropriate. Like, they're just so performative. They're kind of making a game out of like poverty and like real challenges that people face. And yeah, just really thinking about that.
Yeah, that's such an interesting way of thinking about it in terms of like, think about what you would do if you were in person with this. Like, how would you behave and how would it be different?
It's just
Yeah.
like, it's very like, if you're using someone like a prop and they don't have any agency for their story, that's what I mean by voyeuristic donors. Like, who is this for?
Yeah. Okay, we just got another one in that says, impactful stories do tend to generate the most funds. Is the idea to avoid these altogether in order to be CCF aligned, or is there a way to have them tell their story that's more dignified?
So you can definitely tell impactful stories that are dignified.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an issue at all. Like, but it doesn't have to be exploitative. So like, for example, some things that I've done now with participants is like, hey, this is going to be public information. This is going to be used for fundraising. Are you okay with that every step of the way? And then when I'm asking the questions, it's, how did you hear about this organization? Why did you start coming to this organization? Have you made friends with this organization? And like, they can provide as much information as they'd like, but the questions are still very dignified. It's not like, what was it like living in a refugee shelter? What was it like not having food? Like, those, obviously the answer is terrible. And obviously I know what answer you're looking for. Like, you're looking for the most like trauma porn answer that like a constituent can give you. So by opening it up to them, like, what brings you joy? Like, what are you happy about? You know, you're letting them round out their lived experience at a minimum. But yeah, you can tell really impactful stories and still be dignified. Like, that's why I share my story. Like, I'm not crying on camera, but like, it's been hard. And I need you to know that, because that's why CCF matters, because people like me need to be in the room.
Yeah, agreed. So someone has asked, how can we ensure CCF is maintained not only through fundraising and frontline work, but that it also flows through our data entry, donation receiving, and database practices?
Yeah, I love that question. I haven't had a really deep dive on this one just yet, but I've put some thoughts together for that one. So ensuring data entry people are being paid well, not just some of the lowest paid people at the organization. Ensure data entry is being done by paid staff, so it's not just done by volunteers or, you know, the most privileged people. So because usually volunteering is like a step into the sector. So by paying someone for data entry, you eliminate that barrier into the sector. One of my clients came up with this as well recently. So allowing donors to put a preferred name. So instead of having someone be accidentally dead named because that's the name of their credit card or on their ID or whatever, you're letting them be addressed by the name that is theirs. Not using tax receipts as an incentive for people to donate, not using Mr., Mrs., Miss, unless the donor requests it. So some people are like, no, I am doctor. You will never call me anything else. And adding volunteer contact information to the database to make sure that they are also receiving stewardship. But I haven't finished thinking all my thoughts on that one, and I would be very open to learn more about that as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's like, how do you ensure that your data is pointing you in the right direction and telling, or at least starting to tell the story that you're trying to tell, right? Yeah, it's very, very interesting. So we've got one that says, what's the biggest change that the last few years have created for CCF?
I think that's hard for me personally to answer because I'm not part of the global council or anything like that. But from a person who practices CCF and is kind of outside looking into the mechanics of it, it looks like it's becoming a lot more formalized as a internal operation, but also external to that, a lot of organizations are picking it up. A lot of people are more comfortable providing allyship. So with this AFP Toronto petition, right? There's a lot of people who are speaking about it publicly who before would have felt more comfortable saying nothing. Because it's like, what if I lose my job? What if blah, 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 right? It's like, yeah, those are always risks. But by you speaking out, you're taking that risk away from someone who is more marginalized. So yeah, I think it's becoming more on top of people's minds for sure, at a minimum, but more formalized as well.
Yeah. And then I guess we have one more question before we kind of close it out. And there's been so much great information today, and everybody's going to get the recording and be able to watch it again. But what is kind of one thing that you would love everybody to take away from today and go back to their teams and start kind of having, if they haven't already started, having these important conversations or continuing these important conversations?
You're going to meet resistance. It's not going to be easy. Changing systems is never easy. And if it was, we would have a very equitable world. So, you know, is equity something that you value in theory or in practice? And how much are you willing to put on the table, right? So when it comes to like your job security, your relationships with board members, with donors, right? It's very easy to laugh off a joke, a racist joke, or a transphobic comment. It's so much easier than to tell people like that's not okay. So if I could leave you with anything, it's just to find your courage and keep fighting. It is difficult, but finding allies has been really helpful. So for me, over the past year and a half, I've been like really looking towards other fundraisers to vent, to celebrate, to problem solve. So same thing with the planned giving. You know, I've been connecting with people about what do you think that could look like? So, you know, just keep at it. It's hard, but it's important.
Yeah. Okay. I just saw somebody ask about the recording. Yes, you'll get the recording in a link that you can share with anybody that you would like to. So that concludes the session today. Thank you so much again, Maria, for this incredible information that you shared today. I'm sure everyone on the call has something that they can take away, or lots of things they can take away and take back to their organization. Before we go, I just want to let everybody know that there will be a very short survey that will pop up right after the session. Should take you only about 20 seconds to complete, and we would all greatly appreciate hearing your feedback. So I hope you all take a moment to fill that out. We have our next webinar coming up on Tuesday, May 2nd with Mackenzie Burke-Buckler from Double the Donation. Mackenzie's going to walk us through how to build a matching gift strategy and increase donor awareness for your matching gift opportunities. So Steph's going to leave the link to register for that in the chat. And thank you all again. Thank you, Maria. I hope we see you all again at another Key Labs webinar in the future. Thank you.